you have a company, and it's Casco Bay SafeLawns and Landscape.
Right.
Can you tell us a little about that?
Yeah, it's my 4th year in business,
Good for
and
you.
Casco Bay SafeLawns and Landscapes is, I consider myself a transitional company. I help people transition from chemical lawns to organic.
Oh, that's interesting. I should do that.
Yeah, so for instance, if your lawn is on chemicals, it's dependent. It has to have 6 or 8 treatments a year to stay green, or it will start to get hungry and get sick. And it's not a natural system. It takes a lot of energy. An organic system is more sustainable. It's a recycling system. And so I'm trying to get people from that chemical system to the organic. And you kind of go through a phase where I call it the ugly teenager phase. The lawn gets a lot of pimples and zits and weeds.
That's a good
and,
comparison,
and grubs can come in. And a lot of times people say, oh, I went from chemicals to organic and my lawn went to heck. And it's not the fault of the organic, it's the fault of what you did before. So I try to get people through that transition as fast as possible. And what we do is we use a lot of really interesting products that are good for the soil. I can show you very quickly what the program is. So this is a diagram showing the food web, which is in the soil. And what I tell people is it's like the ocean food web. So you know at the bottom of the ocean food web you have plankton and algae and things like that. Without those, you can't have whales. So it goes from the littlest things to the biggest things. So what we do is we build up the smallest things, the bacteria and the fungi. We build that up by putting food in. Believe it or not, I put molasses on lawns.
You do?
Yeah, molasses and alfalfa and soy and kelp and fish. So
that's good to know.
all that stuff is food.
Oh,
and
that's
I'm not feeding the grass. I'm not feeding the grass. The grass can feed itself from the sun. What I'm doing is I'm feeding the bacteria and the fungi, so we're increasing their populations. And what they do is they start to feed the people up the chain, the nematodes, protozoa, amoebas. Have you heard of any of these things?
Oh, yes.
They're larger
I didn't
parts of the soil food
associate
web.
them with soil, though.
Absolutely, yeah. So here's a sample of soil I took from the front yard here. I don't know if you guys can all see this.
Yeah.
This is my core, and the first thing I do when I go to a client's property is I stick this in to see what I've got.
That's like a test.
It's a test of how thick the soil is, how deep it is, how healthy it is. So sometimes I go in and this is how much I get, and that's all. And I know I'm going to be in trouble because if I only have an inch of soil, it's going to be a tough go. And I need to build it up by putting stuff on top. But in this case, from the front yard here, we have about this much is where all the living stuff is going on. See how dark? It's a little bit darker. And then down here we get into a sandy loam, and it's lighter colored. So just in this, we've got billions and billions of bacteria and fungi. There's probably up to maybe 100 miles of fungi going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. It's
Now,
hard to even imagine.
I dug in my garden and saw all these big, long worms.
Yeah.
That's
so
good.
When you have worms, you've got the higher end guys up here, okay? That's the sign of a really healthy soil. I'll
But
put
I
that
think
away.
there is sand underneath, way underneath, because it's been built up.
Yeah. So typically you're going to have your living soil, and then you're going to have something mineral underneath it. And the sand is good because it drains well. Sometimes you have clay, and what's that's going to do? That's going to cause water to pool under there.
That's why I have to water all the time.
Yeah.
That sand, it just...
So in this case, we have more of a sandy mix down here. The nice thing about that is we know we're never going to have issues with water sticking around. What all these microbes and worms and grass roots need is oxygen, believe it or not, even more than water. So you want to have good structure.
How do you get oxygen into grass and earth?
Well, you know, the worms do that for us.
Oh, they do.
And the bacteria and the fungi, you got to think of them as pulling the grains apart, and they create structure. So what happens if we have an organic soil and then someone comes in and says, hey, I want perfection. I'm going to use chemicals. The first thing they're going to do is they're going to fertilize with maybe a synthetic fertilizer, which is really a salt. And when you pour salt on things, what happens to them? They dry right up, right? So the first thing that will happen is the bacteria and the fungi are going to dry up and die. And then there's nothing for the guys up the food chain to eat, so they die, or they're going to die from the pesticides that come in when people spray for grubs, which is part of the program. Mm-hmm. You've all heard of the 4-step program, and each program has something in it that's either an insecticide or synthetic
I don't know what
fertilizer.
the 4-step program is.
Oh, most men definitely know what it is. So the idea is you want to have all the bacteria and fungi in a very healthy state because they're going to help aggregate the soil. They're going to feed the larger microbes up the food chain. Eventually you get worms in, and they're just like bulldozers going around.
Oh, yeah, I saw them.
And they make the castings on the surface, and they're creating a lot of airspace. You can actually feel the difference between a chemical lawn and an organic lawn. Chemical lawn's hard, and it needs to be core aerated every year with a machine that has an engine on it. Organic is softer and spongier because you've got all that life under there.
So